I'm sitting down once again with Becca White, Vermont State Senator of Windsor District, for a brief and breaking update. Mohsen Mahdawi, a 34-year-old Palestinian student and longtime green card holder living in White River Junction, was detained by masked federal agents on Monday, April 14th, while waiting to begin his citizenship interview. Mohsen is both a friend and constituent of Senator White, and they were together at the time of his arrest. It felt important for us to talk about that today. Afterwards, I'll be catching up with Anna Tadio, a Rutland City Alderman, Conservation Law Foundation staff attorney, Killington Resort ski and bike patroller, and international youth tour guide. My name is Jordan Hayden, and this is Vermont's Voice. Senator White, welcome back, and thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. So first, before we get into our brief conversation today, I just want to start by acknowledging that this might be an emotionally intense conversation. And so I just want to acknowledge that and share my gratitude to you for being here and taking the time and being aware that you are probably juggling a lot and have a lot on your shoulders today and this week. So just wanted to say thank you.
Hey, I'll thank you for saying that. Yeah,
of course. So with that, on Monday, April 4th, your friend and constituent, Mohsen Mahdawi, walked into the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services office in Colchester, Vermont. And this was for a regular citizenship interview, or so folks were thinking, because he had been a green card holder for the past 10 years. So sort of normal part of that process is to show up for an interview like that. Unfortunately, roughly an hour later, he did come out, escorted in handcuffs by ICE agents. So you were there this entire time on site, live streaming while all of this was happening. So are you able to walk us through those crucial moments?
Yeah. And I'll start by saying I actually don't know now if they were ICE agents.
Really?
So we're still, they were unmarked folks. We didn't have any kind of understanding of who the folks were. But I would start in a slightly happier place with the day, which is the citizenship interview that Mohsen had. He had trepidation about. There was definitely concern that this was a honeypot type situation. Although we went into it with a lot of optimism, there was pre-preparation that was done in the case that they may attempt to detain or deport him from that situation. So there was awareness, and he reached out to me about 3 weeks before the citizenship interview and said, "Hey, could you give me a call? I'd like to touch base." And I gave him a call, and we talked and had a lovely conversation and kind of checked in, and he described that he had been unexpectedly invited on April 14th to a citizenship interview after, as you rightly pointed out, having a green card for just about a decade. He asked for me to join to support him, and I was an immediate, heck yeah, that's my job. If there's anything that I can do as your friend, as your state senator, I would happily do that, especially to help you get a step closer to being a citizen of the United States. And I also felt concerned when he told me and agreed that there was a good chance that this was a setup, essentially. Okay. So going into that, that morning at 10 a.m., we gathered a group of his friends and folks who were supportive, a really eclectic group of folks. And we sat with him and his lawyer, and we were joking and kind of talking about the Constitution. Hey, who wrote the Constitution? Like, this is going to be one of those questions.
Right.
And as he was leaving with his friend Dave, who also accompanied him into the interview, and his lawyer, we shared a hug. And, I said, good luck. And he basically said, don't worry. So I went into the actual interview feeling reasonably okay with the situation. And myself and a friend, Dan, drove over to the appointment where they had the office complex shortly after 11, just to kind of scope it out. And we were driving around while Dave and the lawyer and Mohsen were inside at the interview. And we were driving around. And that was when I first became very aware that this was not what it was purporting to be. Because as Dan and I were driving around, there were multiple vehicles with two men sitting in their vehicles, idling with hats, sunglasses for like large vehicles, like just not things you see in a parking lot in Vermont.
Right.
Just immediately, this feels off. So Dan and I parked next to one of the vehicles we felt were suspicious, and kind of hung out and were walking around the parking lot. This was a beautiful day. So we were walking around looking at different vehicles, and we got a text that said the interview started. Again, false flag of positivity.
Right.
Maybe things are moving in the right direction. And then we just kind of waited in the parking lot. And as we were getting a little bit increasingly anxious as the time continued, I started to take photos of the license plates and just surveying a little bit around. And then right around 12, Dave texted our group and said, Mohsen has been handcuffed. And that's when my entire world, just like the complete shift happened, which is when I, for whatever motivation I had in the moment, I thought people need to know that this is happening right now. So as a millennial, my first reaction, in hindsight, very funny, but in the moment, not funny at all, was to live stream it on Instagram.
I think that was a great idea.
That was like I was like, this is how people are going to find out.
And it was.
So it was okay in that regard. So I started to live stream on Instagram. And if anyone watches the video, I'm like at times coherent, at times not. But I started to, when we got the text and I started to live stream, the vehicles in the parking lot began to move. And that was when I started to really panic, because it became clear that they were going to take him out of the building. And we didn't, these are unmarked cars that are starting to move around the parking lot. And during that time, some men got out of the vehicles and started to put on tactical gear. And that's when I really was like, okay, we are in a very dangerous situation. I don't know who these people are. And I started to approach them and be pretty persistent in, who are you? Why are you here? And I was told, I don't need to tell you that information.
I thought they did, though.
I thought they did, too. I still haven't got clarity on that part. I'm pretty sure they did need to tell me. And then I tried a second tactic with a different man, which is where I introduced myself. And I said, hi, I'm Becca White. I'm a state senator. I have my little name tag on. Can you tell me why you're here, who you are, and do you know about my friend Mohsen? And one of the gentlemen was like, yes, I know about the situation. And so at that point, we knew it was pretty confirmed. So I basically was running around the back of the parking lot trying to capture any images of the people who I believed were about to abduct him. And during that time, Dan went around the front and other individuals had been up at the top. And they ultimately were able to get a video of him being taken out. And what I saw was this basically parade of vehicles go up and around and then burn out, screech out of the parking lot. So that's what I experienced. Once I got up to the top of the building, within moments of them leaving, Chris, who had been there, who had been able to catch a video of the actual him being taken out of the building, he filmed it, and I was able to watch that. And at that point, I didn't quite know what to do, but we had spoken before about making sure the federal delegation was aware and making sure that there were certain groups of people who we could alert if something went awry. So we just basically started making those calls. And that's really what happened that day in that moment. And that was Monday.
Right. I I can't believe how slow the week is going in that regard. I feel like this literally just happened. I wasn't even a part of it, but I just watched the live stream. It was horrifying. I feel like I could feel your terrified energy. I commend you for remaining the composure that you did. I know you're joking, saying like, oh, I was kind of incoherent, but I think you held it together really well.
Yeah, that is, I think if I could have done it over, I would have, I think as anyone would have, I would have loved a training on what to do in that moment, because I didn't quite know what was valuable information to communicate. Mm-hmm. So I kept naming like the number that was the building without giving the street address, so
give it at least once.
Well, I did give it once. That was, but I'm like yelling Colchester, we're Colchester.
Well, in a panic state, I think you did a great job. And this is not something that we necessarily come to expect in our everyday lives here in Vermont. So I would give yourself a little grace there if you can.
I think there was a lot of naivete going into it in a way that, like Dan and I are in, it's like 3 people from the Upper Valley running around the back of a parking lot trying to not let their friend be abducted. Like it's
surreal.
It's completely surreal.
Okay. Well, picking up from that point of the story, the news began to break pretty quickly after, which brought on a federal judge to very quickly sign a temporary restraining order, which was actually great in this scenario, because that meant that Mohsen could stay in the state of Vermont.
Yes.
And so right now he is being held at the Northwest State Correctional Facility over in St. Albans, still not having been arrested for any actual crime. Is that right?
Yes. At this point, we are not aware, like at this moment as we're recording, I am not aware of any charges that were filed against him. What we have heard is Marco Rubio saying that he was and we should definitely talk about who Mohsen is.
Oh, we will.
Okay.
Sir.
We heard that he was supposedly detrimental to the Israeli-Palestine peace process, and that is why he was detained. That is my understanding of what we have come to understand is the reason. And that's similar to what we saw with other individuals who have been taken recently, where we haven't really been given evidence or explanation of why.
Right. I mean, this happened on the same day of the hearing for Rumesa Ozturk. So another example right there. So despite all of this, the fact that it's very loose and shaky, the evidence here to be taking him to jail.
Yes.
ICE's ultimate intention here is to deport Mohsen back to the occupied West Bank, which is a place where he has suffered the loss of various family members over the years. Now, it's my understanding that his legal team is working incredibly hard to prevent this from happening. So with respect to the privacy and sensitivity of this evolving case, I'm wondering if there's anything you can tell us about possible next steps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'll say just a huge shout out to his legal team, because in preparation for the possibility of him being taken, they had prepared a habeas corpus motion, which allowed him to stay in Vermont. So shortly after he was abducted, we were not sure where they had taken him. He could have been taken to Williston. He could have been taken to St. Albans. I've heard that he was potentially going to be flown out that day. So a very similar tactic to what they did, where they moved the woman from Somerville, Massachusetts to Vermont, in an attempt to not allow, to basically then move her wherever they wanted. So we did head that off, and that is a first. I mean, that was a huge win day one, just to be able to keep him in Vermont. So he has a status conference next, which is a way of seeing the case, having it reviewed, seeing if there's any pending action, setting deadlines for next steps, also encouraging resolution where possible. So that's happening Wednesday, April 23rd in the morning here in Vermont. So that's the next step. What his legal team is working on at this moment is compiling letters that are from those who know Mohsen and can speak to his character. because obviously the number one goal right now is to have him be released. So there is potentially opportunities for that to happen. And what we saw with Rumesa was she had many letters of support, both from her institution, but from people who knew her. And so now we're in the process of trying to find, and it's been easy because people are reaching out, but people who know Mohsen, have lived and been in his community, who can speak to his character. And one of the key things is why his detention is such a destabilizing force in our community. So that's the next step, is really building that, showing to the court just who this man is, and what he means to our community. And then from there, there's actually kind of two parallel legal cases. There's one that is on his behalf, which is in Vermont. And to your point, having the restraint of him staying in Vermont is a part of that. And then the other is the federal case to try to deport him. So those are happening at the same time. And I don't have any more information beyond that at this moment. But folks can, it's public record as things come up. And people can see and follow the case through the docket if they would like. And if folks know Mohsen and they'd like to contribute a letter, that is very welcomed, as well as institutions who have, if they've had him as a member, or like we saw with Tufts University, we're looking for folks who are associated with education institutions to provide that as well.
Got it. Okay. That's a great call to action. It leads into my next point and question. As you've already seen, it's been a short period of time, but Vermonters are very quickly mobilizing in support of Mohsen, which is a wonderful thing to see. Last night, activists were rallying at the correctional facility in St. Albans. I know there's another gathering coming up in his district, I think tomorrow. So there's a lot going on. And I'm wondering if there's anything else our listeners can do right now to provide that support to Mohsen.
Yeah, I'd say there's really three calls to action at this point. Okay. The first is, and I think this is like any situation where there's legal costs, is there's a GoFundMe that was set up to support him. That money is being used to support his basic commissary needs as well as the legal defense. And then if there is money that is still available, he would like it to go to organizations that support peace and promote peace. So there's that first one. The second is communicating, if you're not a Vermonter or you have friends who are not in Vermont, to communicate with your elected leaders, your congressional leaders, to sign on to the resolution that is being circulated calling for his release.
Okay.
So there is work happening. Congresswoman Becca White is circulating that within Congress. So if you have folks who are not Vermonters but would like to take a stand, all of our folks are on it, obviously, but other states as well. And then the last call to action would actually be a real reflection, I think, of his values, which Mohsen is a very peaceful meditator. That's who he is. And he would like any kind of demonstrations or any kind of physical action that people take to be in kind of that space. So meditating and taking time to reflect, I think, would be a really valuable call to action. And it's kind of like an interesting one for me, because I think a lot of us are feeling extremely heightened right now.
Yeah.
Because there is so much coming at us. And one of the key things that I think I've learned even in the last few days is just being able to take a moment and doing a little bit of that focus time can have such impacts for how you react to things and are in the world. So I'd say it's a little funny, but the call to action would be to kind of sit and be in a meditative state as much as possible to center your thoughts, which is what he's doing. So
Right. Yeah. I think that's lovely.
yeah.
And you've spoken a little bit about his character here, and that's sort of where I want to end this conversation. I want to hear more about Mohsen as a person, as the person that you know. I mean, you've mentioned over the past few days to me that he is a practicing Buddhist. You go to church together. He is a longtime friend and sort of the last person you ever expected to be in this situation. So what more would you like us to know about him?
Yeah, well, you should know that while Mohsen and I are friends, I am not his. He has a network of people. It's not just me. In fact, I've learned that he has impacted a lot of people's lives. And so when Mohsen came to the Upper Valley back in like 2016, he came here because of a connection to Dartmouth and then chose to stay in the Upper Valley. And when he moved here, we met in part because there aren't a lot of young people. And so when you see another person under the age of 40, you
stop and say hello.
Yeah, you make eye contact. And he's also been very engaged in communicating the lived experience of being a Palestinian man, while also expressing just all of the ways that he has, how he has a vision of peace and wanting there to be empathy. I've met multiple people since this has happened who feel very spiritually connected to him. And it's interesting because the people who have reached out to me who have been just desperate for information about him are people who have told me they went to a movie with him. You know, they saw a documentary and they had a beautiful discussion afterwards. They had dinner and they discussed like deep things. And it's very clear that he had an ability to, and still, I mean, he still has an ability to do this, to transcend a lot of things that usually you if you can understand someone, you can have a much better conversation. And he's been able to have conversations with folks about topics like his experiences in Palestine, with people who have never been to Palestine, don't understand what it's like to be in a camp, and do it in a way that helps people relate and understand and see parallels in their own lives. So that's been pretty profound. And I feel really honored to be kind of a part of that in a way, because our community in the Upper Valley, although he's been at Columbia for a few years now, he's still had many connections to our area. The other thing that I've heard quite a bit about is he has a cabin in West Fairleigh, and he loves nature, loves to hike. It's just kind of the classic getting centered in nature. And yeah, that's what I would say. And the reason I think it's so startling that he was identified and taken in this way is because he has so specifically been about nonviolence.
Right.
And the reason that we were told that he has been detained is because that he might be causing problems. And if anything, he's saying the exact opposite to that. So it feels like not only a complete mismatch of our resources, but also a really clear targeting of someone who is speaking to nonviolence. And that's, I think time will tell just how, in some ways, that is dangerous for a government when you have someone who's saying nonviolence and promoting cooperation. Like that can be scary to a government. So I think he will, I think there will be more information that will be shared kind of about his positionings and the work that he did while he was at Columbia as a student protester. And there's a fantastic New York Times article that came out today that actually analyzed over 100 speeches and lectures that he's given on the topic to really try to check that claim of, is there something actually under the surface to this that is either anti-Semitic or trying to encourage violence? And what the New York Times reported on was very squarely not the case. So, yeah.
Wow. Well, I look forward to reading that article. And I'm happy that I got to learn a little bit more about him. He sounds like a truly incredible person.
Totally.
I have not had the pleasure of meeting him yet, but I did find a quote from him, something that he shared actually a day before he was detained, and it's the quote that I want to end on today as we wrap this up. He said, "It's an irony, the irony of destiny, and I accept the outcome. If my story will become another story for the struggle to have justice and democracy in this country, let it be." Beautiful, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, Senator White, I know this was not an easy conversation to have, but again, I thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, thank you for making the space for it. I think there's a lot of overlap between this conversation and just the work that we need to do to protect our democracy. So I feel really honored to have had Mohsen ask me to support him in this, because now we have an opportunity to community organize and support him.
And we'll keep doing it.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're now going to pivot to an interview we filmed a few weeks ago with Anna Tadio. Together, we'll talk about Anna's passions for local politics, climate action, the beautiful Vermont environment that surrounds us, and a whole lot more. We hope you stick around. Well, Anna, thank you so much for being here today, and welcome to Vermont's Voice.
Thanks for having me. Super excited to be here.
Amazing. And as you know, we have tried to make this happen for quite some time. It took a little while. We've been talking since way before town meeting, and it is now April. So really glad that we were finally able to sit down together. I think it's going to be totally worth it. And also just want to mention, I don't know if you're aware, but you do like a lot of things. And I want to make sure that our listeners are aware of that too before we get into this conversation, because Anna, you serve as a Rutland City Alderman, a Conservation Law Foundation staff attorney, and a Killington Resort ski and bike patroller. Is that right?
Correct. I'm also an international tour guide for students. I led a trip in February.
Okay, wow.
But yeah.
Okay, so it makes sense that it took a little while for you to get here. You've got a lot going on, and we're so grateful that you're taking the time to sit down. We're going to talk about all of these things, but I think it makes sense to start with your work in Rutland City as an alder person, alder man, alder woman. What do you prefer?
Well, it's funny you should mention. So the Rutland City Board of Aldermen is Rutland City Council.
Okay.
And so it is, the term alderman actually means older man in Latin.
Okay.
And the Board of Aldermen, the Rutland City Board of Aldermen, has been in existence since the 1800s.
Wow.
Rutland Town was actually formed in the 1700s before our country was a country. So there's a lot of history seeped in Rutland. Unfortunately, we've chosen to keep the term alderman, and that's unfortunate because it is a gendered term. I do see a lot of people, reporters, or different people in the community. Do I call you alderwoman, alderman, alderperson? So some people call me alderwoman, some people call me alderman. But if we did someday change the name to Rutland City Council, you could just say councilor, and it's non-gendered, and that would be better for everybody and sort of more inclusive.
Right.
But I have other projects that are more important, so I haven't
tackled that.
tried to change the name at this time. But the Rutland City Board of Aldermen, the old men.
Wow. Okay. So you'll just be considered an old man until the time comes where you make that change.
Evidently.
Okay. Wow. That's good to know. And thank you for sharing that, because I tried to research the history of alder people in Rutland City. I wasn't sure where it came from. So you came prepared with that knowledge, and I appreciate that. But as you mentioned, this is essentially a city council, right? The Board of Aldermen. Is there a difference between those two bodies, or is it really just the thing of the name?
No, it's just the name. There's 11 of us. We are the legislative body of the city. It's similar to a select board in towns. So because we're a city, it's the Board of Aldermen, or what is a city council.
Interesting. Okay, that's good to know. Thank you for clearing that up. So I talked about it super briefly. Town meeting day has come and gone. But over in Rutland City, there were 12 alderman candidates vying for 6 seats. Now, this time, you were not running for a seat. You got to kind of sit pretty in the back and just watch it all unfold. Could you talk a little bit about that dichotomy, what it's like having to run and be on that forefront versus just watching and knowing that you are okay, at least for a moment?
Well, so I was really actually actively engaged in trying to get the members of our board that I are on the same page as me reelected.
Okay.
So
you're still busy.
So there's less emotional stress in terms of I'm not the person whose sign is out on the side of the street. I'm not the person trying to get reelected, trying to whip votes. But but it still really matters who my peers are. And so I did work really hard between helping candidates edit letters, hosting yard signs, attending honkin' waves, doing lit drops, so going door to door and dropping off flyers, helping candidates address their mail, their direct mail. So really trying to help candidates run a holistic campaign. I am a proud graduate Emerge trains Democratic women to run for office in Rutland, in the state of Vermont, and actually nationally. But I've taken those skills to Rutland, and I'm trying to help people who are of similar mindset. We have a local group called Rutland Forward who brings people together and helps support them get elected. Just during the election season, we come together. We are nonpartisan, but I've tried to use a lot of my Emerge training skills and help candidates that I know will further environmental policies, human rights policies, good economic development opportunities in Rutland. Those are the type of people I've tried to support to get reelected.
Wow. Okay. That's incredible. Sounds like even if you weren't personally, emotionally invested, knowing that you weren't on the line, that still feels very, I don't know, investing. It feels like you would still be just as connected to that process, even if you're not on the line.
Totally. I was going to about 2 meetings a week in addition to just everything else going on in the 2 months leading up to election to provide support, advice, help candidates prep for their forums, et cetera. So it's a lot, but it's important work, and it matters who is serving in local government.
Yeah, absolutely. On top of your 12 other jobs, you said, this is important. I have to do this.
Yeah.
And I value that so much in you. Okay, speaking of doing lots of work, I looked at your current committee assignments, and if I'm correct, you're currently sitting on 6 committees.
And things have changed, but go ahead and read out what I was sitting on.
Okay, here's what you were sitting on. Chair of Community and Economic Development, and Chair of Environmental Sustainability, Vice Chair of Public Safety, and then just sitting on Charter and Ordinance, General, and Human Resources. And that sounds insane to me. That's a lot of things.
It's funny you should mention. So I've been on the board for 3 years now, starting my 4th year. My 2nd year on the Board of Aldermen, I was chair of 4 committees, actually. I was also chair of General and Human Resources because we had so many new members, people that had never served before. And so because there were so many new folk, I stepped up into these leadership roles.
Okay.
2 committees was a lot more manageable last year. So sadly, on town meeting day, only one of our Rutland Forward candidates was reelected. And so now there are only really 3 of us that are of a more liberal, progressive mindset on the board. The rest of the folks that were elected and reelected, and I say reelected because some people had served on the board years ago, and now they've come back to serve. So the people that were running on the more conservative side of things are all old Rutland names.
Okay.
And so from my perspective, unfortunately, a lot of those people got elected in this election cycle, and they chose to appoint as our current president the former mayor of Rutland.
Oh.
So how it works is the president of the Board of Aldermen gets to decide on all of the select committees, gets to determine, and also gets to make committee assignments. So the current president stripped me of all my power. It must have been a threat. Stripped me of all my power. I'm no longer chair of any committee, and he dissolved the Environmental Sustainability Committee, which is quite devastating. There were projects in that committee that I'm working on. I think I've found a way to continue to work on those projects in other committees, but I think it's really a strong signal that the current president and the dynamic of this board is not interested in progress, is not interested in protecting our environment, and is sending a really strong signal that it's going to be a lot of extra work on my part to make sure that things are still moving forward, even though I have no more power to schedule committee meetings. So as chair of a committee, right, you schedule the meetings, you run the meeting, and then you type up the meeting minutes.
Right.
So I have really high expectations of the people who have taken over as chair of the committees that I was running for 2 years. I'm hoping that they will continue to operate with the same level of efficiency, with the same level of professionalism, and with the same nicely typed up, written up notes at the end of the meetings that are delivered on time. I really held myself to a high standard, and I hope that the people taking over these chairs after me can do the same, because it's important work for our community.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll be watching, so hope they do that.
Yeah.
And I had no idea any of this was happening, so I'm glad I brought this up and shared, and I'm so sorry that that's the case, but I feel like it's important that we're airing it out so that people are aware that this is happening.
Definitely.
Because I'm sure Rutland City, it's not the only place where this kind of thing is taking place, right? But I don't know that we're talking about it enough and what impacts those things have on our communities, right?
Totally.
And just talking about all of the extra work that you now have to involve yourself in just to make sure that we're keeping up with the very important work that you were doing.
Right.
So again, so sorry to hear that, but thank you for enlightening me and our listeners, and hopefully some listeners in Rutland City as well who may not be as tuned in.
Totally.
Okay, so clearly you have a lot of experience in local politics. You just talked about a little bit of it, and you've been doing it for years. I'm curious if you have advice for any Vermonters who might be looking into getting involved as an alderman or a councillor or something else completely.
Totally. Yeah. My advice would be, think about your motivation and your desire to serve and what that stems from. So if you're maybe a parent and you have children in the school system and you're mostly concerned about school policies, that would be a good time to think about maybe running for your local school board. If you are concerned with a city budget and how the rec department or the police and the fire department are running, or that, you're concerned about having the streets paved, there are potholes that you're upset about, that would be a good time to get involved in your local select board, city council, board of aldermen, whatever that looks like. And then I think you would probably want to start with one of those before running for mayor of your city.
Right. That'd be a good idea.
Yeah. So, and I would encourage anybody to think about getting involved. If you are a VPIRG listener and you live in Rutland, please reach out to me. I'd be happy to chat with you about what running looks like and if there are ways that I could support you to run.
Perfect. Thank you for that call to action. All right. So we're going to pivot in just a moment, and you totally don't have to answer this question if you don't want to. But I'm wondering if we can expect to see more of you in political involvement in the future. And again, you don't have to answer that, but wondering if you have any thoughts on what comes next for you.
100%. You can expect to see me. I don't know which spot I will be running for. At this time in 2022, I ran for state senate for Rutland County. And then this last November, I was running for state representative for Rutland County. I'm born and raised in Rutland. I recognize that it is historically a more conservative place, and I'm pretty liberal. I really, really care about the future of all people. I really care about the environment. I care about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And those are values that I want to bring into the government and advocate for. So I don't envision going anywhere. And honestly, all of the people that beat me they're not going to be there for forever. They're older. And so their time will come when they will be retiring, and whether I will be challenging them in this upcoming election or whether it will be one after that when they're retiring remains to be seen. But I will be back, and whether it's state senate or state rep, I'm not sure at this time.
Got it.
Maybe both at some point.
You're just waiting for the right opportunity to strike. Yeah, I love that.
Yep.
Okay. Yep. Good to know. I'll be watching. I'll be waiting. Very exciting stuff. All right. So I want to talk about some of your other work experiences that I mentioned a little bit earlier. But before we do that, we have to play a quick round of District Delights, which gives you the opportunity to share some of your local Rutland favorites. Does that sound good?
Absolutely.
All right. So let's play District Delights with Anna Tadio. Okay. Could you tell me the best place to grab a bite to eat?
I have to choose two. So one is Sugar and Spice, which is actually in Mendon, but still in Rutland County. That's the best place for breakfast. They make their own maple syrup there, and they charge you extra for fake maple syrup. It's great. Highly recommend Sugar and Spice.
That's so cool.
The other place is Taco Fresco on Center Street in Rutland. It's a great place for lunch, dinner, and it's a taco bar and tequila ria.
Okay.
Yeah.
That sounds fun.
Yeah, really fun.
All right. Best place for a morning latte?
Speakeasy Cafe, and big shout out to Speakeasy. They've been very politically supportive, actually.
Oh, cool.
Where some stores won't necessarily host candidate signs, Speakeasy has been very supportive of the more forward-thinking candidates in our city. So thank you, Bridget.
Amazing. I love that. All right. Where would you go to cuddle up with a good book?
My first thought was my backyard and my hammock, but no, Center Street. It's funny. walking down Center Street, we have this like little park at the end of Center Street. And if I just wanted to sort of like sit there and actually more watch the world go by and pretend to read, it might be like a good spot.
That's cool. On a day that's not like today where it's rainy,
right?
Kind of nasty, but spring is here and it's going to be nice soon.
Right. Okay. It's near where the farmer's market is in the summer is where I would just station up, just hang out.
That's nice. Do some people watching.
Yeah.
It's all good. All right. Where would you go to pick up some local produce? Is it the farmer's market?
Yeah, it is the farmer's market. And we also have a winter farmer's market, which is great. Our farmer's market operates year round. They move indoors in the winter. So,
okay. Where would you go to have fun and enjoy nature?
Oh, gosh. Pine Hill Park to go mountain biking or to take my dog hiking. I would go to the Chittenden Reservoir to go kayaking or just swimming. And then I would go to Killington to go skiing.
Okay, I was going to ask. I was like, are you not going to bring up Killington?
Yeah, definitely Killington to go skiing.
Okay, cool. We're going to come back to that in just a second. But do you have any other honorable mentions? Anything else you wanted to lift up before we move into that question?
Honestly, Rutland, even just since COVID, I feel like there have been so many new businesses springing up. One of my favorite stores is the plant store Greenspell right on Center Street. But, you know, a fun day of shopping would be to just peruse all along Center Street. There's a bunch of different stores, bookstores, little
record store.
Yeah, it's record stores. So it's just fun to go walk around downtown Rutland. I think there's a little something for everybody there.
Yeah, I love Rutland. I haven't been a ton, maybe 5 or 6 times, but I've enjoyed it and look forward to going back every time I am in the area. So
I feel like there's more new stores than Middlebury or Manchester. And as a kid, it always used to be exciting to, we're going to Middlebury or Manchester, we're leaving. But now I'm like, I think really Middlebury and Manchester should come to Rutland. For shopping anyway. Yeah.
Right. No, it's great. Okay, cool. Thank you. Yeah. I'll have to make a trip over soon.
Please do.
All right. So talking more about your job at Killington, it sounds like a total blast. So we need to discuss that. And I'm wondering how you became a patroller. Like, how does one do that?
Sure. So I graduated law school during COVID. And I took an October bar exam, which is abnormal. So while I was waiting for my bar results, I was like, okay, I need to do something and make sure I pass the bar, and I don't want to start my legal career.
Yeah.
So I became a full-time patroller, actually, that first winter. And to become a patroller, you need to get your outdoor emergency care certification, which is basically an EMT, but for specifically being on the mountain. And it doesn't involve information about what it's like to operate an ambulance, like to be inside of the rig. So you go through about 6 weeks of that training. You have to pass a written and physical test. The physical test being like doing stuff on somebody, like a skills test.
Okay.
And then is 3 weeks of sled training. So you start with the medical, and then you basically sled training, meaning to run a toboggan down the mountain. So somebody, let's say they tear their ACL, they're on the side of the mountain. I'm sitting at the top. I get a call. I take my sled, the toboggan, ski down to the person, evaluate them, put them in the sled, and then ski them down the rest of the way to a first aid room. And then if they can go home, great. If not, the ambulance comes to the first aid room. And that's sort of how patrol works. But so, yeah, it's really quite a big commitment, the training component of it.
Yeah.
But so I did full-time patrol for 2 years. And then now I've been part-time patrolling for the last 3 years every Saturday. So it's been 5 years on patrol, but yeah, I do really love it. I like helping people. I enjoy the medical aspect. I also like preventing accidents, making sure a trail is closed that could keep somebody safe, or hazards being marked. That's part of our job too. We're out skiing around looking for things maybe somebody would trip on. Okay, you mark it with a stick of bamboo. That's, day in the life of patrol.
That's so cool though. And you get paid to ski or bike depending on the season.
So bike patrol, I do bike patrol. Also, we do that from ATVs. So we're on an ATV driving around because you can't, so behind the ATV, then you can have the toboggan.
Interesting.
The sled on wheels. It would be much more difficult to be biking somebody down and have them behind you.
Right. Okay.
So in the summer, I mean, bike patrollers can take a lap on their bike, but I'm not patrolling from a bike. I'm out on a quad. So this is a little different. Ski patrol for me is more fun.
Okay. Okay. And you must be a pretty good skier. I could never do that kind of job.
My dad, shout out, has been a ski instructor at Killington for 40 years, my whole life. So I'm just like born and raised skiing.
Okay.
And I used to be a ski instructor, but I always wanted to be a patroller. And so now here we are.
That. Oh my gosh, that's so cool. Okay. I do want to get more into skiing/snowboarding, but I'm just afraid I'm going to break things.
Oh, come with me. I'm an instructor and a patroller. Come,
Okay.
I'll teach you.
We'll have a day in Rutland. We'll go over to Killington.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. I feel like I could trust you to help me out and protect my limbs. All right, cool. So pivoting again, because again, you do so much. So we've talked about how much you do locally, but you're doing things beyond the Vermont scope as well. You are serving as a staff attorney with Conservation Law Foundation. And as I understand it, you are focused right now on 2 big oil lawsuits. And I'm hoping to learn more about that. What can you tell us?
Yeah, definitely. So Conservation Law Foundation, how it works is there are 6 different programs. One of those programs is strategic litigation. Other ones are a focus on oceans, environmental justice, clean air and water, and climate change and clean energy. So different focuses. And then there's also 5 different states that we are based in. Okay. So we do have a Vermont office focusing on Vermont initiatives, et cetera. I'm part of the strategic litigation team. And so my lawsuits are actually in Rhode Island and Connecticut.
Oh, wow.
The strategic litigation team, as of right now, kind of our wheelhouse is targeting large oil majors and kind of the goal being to prevent oil spills. So the specifics, so these are actively in litigation right now. So I'll tell you sort of a high level overview of what this really looks like. But basically on the coast in Rhode Island and Connecticut, there are these 2 large terminals, and big tankers bring fuel and other toxic chemicals in from around the world, and they offload them where they're now stored, right basically in like Narragansett Bay and then off the coast of Connecticut in Newport. So, New Haven, in New Haven, Connecticut, off the coast in New Haven. But so basically these terminals are there, and then truckers come in and take the fuel away. So these terminals, in order to operate, they're governed under the Clean Water Act. And in order to discharge any sort of water, or like, let's say it rains and then the rain is percolating off of the edge of the building, and now that water is going to go into the ground. In order for these terminals to be operating, they need to get a permit under the Clean Water Act. And so Conservation Law Foundation's theory is that per the terms of their permit, they need to be considering climate change and need to prepare their facilities for climate change. Mm-hmm. And so basically, like, all of these facilities should have extra berms to prevent when hurricanes roll through, these major category 2, 3, 4, 5 storms roll through, they could very easily cause a flood. So other facilities that are very similar to these have had oil spills, massive oil spills. And so at least these 2 facilities that I'm talking about, they're both against Shell Oil Company that I'm working on. And both of these facilities are located in low-income communities of color. And so it's unacceptable to have an oil spill, but if there was an oil spill in this area, it would be even more difficult. The consequences would be disastrous for these communities. They don't have the resources to even relocate. So the goal is to prevent oil spills. The goal would be for them to, put secondary containment layers and basically prepare for both climate change, increased storms, increased hurricane risk. They're right there. Like, if you look in a video, like a Google footage, and you're looking at these terminals, like, the ocean is right there. Wow. So we're trying to do some preventative work, prevent some oil spills.
Wow. Well, thanks for that. Yeah, it feels like pretty rewarding work, I imagine, and deeply important. So I hope it continues to go well. And I won't push more because I know these are active lawsuits. So thank you for what you were able to share. And while you mentioned that these lawsuits are taking place in both Connecticut and Rhode Island, I think the work is still relevant to what we're doing here in Vermont on big oil. And actually, we just recently spoke with your colleague, Anthony Europino, about the Climate Superfund. And so I know that these are different, but we are still sort of in the same boat of trying to protect folks from these big oil and gas companies. And so I'm wondering if you feel like there is any room for collaboration with other states and what that looks like as you continue on with your work.
Well, it's funny. I did some research, and there's only one massive terminal type facility, and it's in Burlington, in the state of Vermont, like above ground storage tank facility that Global Solutions, they're called. And so I was trying to think, like, some of these claims that we're making, could they be made against this facility, or what would that really look like? Like, this is not being considered by CLF. This was a personal consideration. I was thinking, could these claims be replicated? And I think Possibly some of it, yes, right? Like under the Clean Water Act to prepare to make sure that the terminal is not having spills. Also under the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act is another, we're making claims under that as well to basically prevent an imminent and substantial endangerment from a spill. So I was trying to think, global, are they in an area that's at risk of flooding? Could there be an oil spill from that way? Vermont over the past couple of years has seen extreme flooding. And so is this, and I haven't done the technical scientific research to find out, but is Global Solutions in a place where maybe there is room for them to improve their facility? Are they fully, do they have impermeable secondary containment layers? Or could they have a spill in Burlington? And so that would be something to consider. But CLF has, as far as I know, is not actively considering that. Right. But that would sort of be a way to replicate the type of cases that we're working on in strategic litigation. And, just to give a little shout out to CLF, we have had success in the past. CLF had a lawsuit against ExxonMobil that they ultimately ended up settling, and that facility is now closed.
Wow.
So.
Okay. Impressive.
Yeah. So, and then I do, my colleagues in the Vermont office do work really hard to support the Global Warming Solutions Act, the Clean Heat Standard. There is a lot of legislation in the state of Vermont right now, actually, that, I personally am very much in support of moving forward or just keeping the momentum that we had. But obviously, with the loss of the supermajority of the Democrats, I think some of that will be a little more difficult now. But I'm supportive of the work that my colleagues are doing from the Vermont CLF office.
Got it.
To support that work.
Yeah. And so that collaboration does happen. Maybe it's in different ways from what you're doing with your current big oil lawsuits, but I think it does all tie in, and it's interesting to hear your perspective on what could be possible in the future. Maybe we'll see it, maybe we won't, right? But just still fascinating from my perspective of not having a law degree to just sort of see how you're working through that. So I think that's really exciting. And I feel like we've had a deeply robust conversation today, and I'm loving it. But those are the questions that I have for you. So I'm wondering if there's anything else you'd like to lift up or talk about before I let you get back to your day.
Yes. I think right now it's really easy to feel overwhelmed and like you just want to go back to sleep and crawl under a pillow. The news coming out of our federal government is devastating. The news coming at the statewide level is not so inspiring. And then things happening at the local level are also really frustrating. I think right now, fundamentally, our democracy is at risk. I think probably the biggest issue in America right now is our democracy. I think probably the biggest issue globally would be climate change, followed by income inequality, massive income inequality. So I guess what I would like to leave my listeners with, if you will, is a call to action. Whether you're introverted or extroverted, there is a place for you in this movement. There is a place to get involved. Even if that means in the midterms, registering a friend to vote, as simple as getting somebody who's never voted before to vote. I would encourage folks to get involved in their local governments, even if that means just attending a meeting of your city council or your select board. Go to a meeting and see what's being discussed. I think where we have power now is at the local level as opposed to at the national level. We really can take back control of what is happening to us and our communities at the local level. And so I would encourage people to get involved. I think if you've ever wondered, should I donate to a nonprofit? Yes, now's the time. Have I ever considered phone banking for somebody? Now is the time. It's just, I think as much as it's easy to just decide to not read the news, I think that there is a balance of finding a trusted news source, check it every couple days, make sure that you're not living under a rock and that you are engaging. Now is not the time to sit back. Now is the time to step up because our cities, our state, our country really need action. We need bold action now. So I would just encourage people to find the courage to stand up for what is right. And what is right is a country that is accepting of all people, that is supportive of immigrants and refugees that founded this country, that is supportive of LGBTQIA people. Like there is no reason to have a target on these folks' backs. We deserve a country that is supportive of our veterans. And we deserve a country where People that make under $100,000 aren't paying more in taxes than billionaires. Our system is so messed up and there's so much work to be done, but there's opportunities to get involved. VPIRG always has opportunities to get involved. Find out how you can get involved here. 350.org. There are countless organizations doing the work, doing good work. Find a local group and get involved. Now is not the time to stand down. So that's what I would say.
Okay, well, I have chills. So thank you for that. There's absolutely no way I can follow it up. So I think we leave it there because that was deeply empowering. And I so appreciate your words. And Anna, I just want to say thank you again so much for being here, for taking the time out of your very busy life. And I am so excited to see whatever it is you do next. I know it's going to be great. So I just look forward to that. And thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thanks for listening. Thank you. Thank you.
And that's our episode. I want to extend a heartfelt thank you to Senator White for joining us during a very difficult time, and to Anna Tadio for taking the time to chat about all of the incredible work she's doing. To learn more about anything we talked about, visit vpirg.org, get on our mailing list, and follow us on social media. Don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe, and rate us 5 stars. If you have thoughts on today's episode, send me an email at jhayden@vpirg.org. Finally, I'd like to give a special thanks to my co-producer, Elijah Cushion. I'm Jordan Hayden, and you've been listening to Vermont's Voice. These are difficult times, and we feel them too. So please, take care and talk soon.